Hey, hey, all you spooky cabin crew and listeners. Welcome to the Conversation Cabin podcast. I'm your daring host, Farah, and welcome to the Paranormal Project Presents Tuesday Top Terror Alien Species, Episode 2, The Greys. Are you all ready for a great show tonight? Because I am, and we're going to take it to the top. But first, a little prayers go out. Amanda will not be joining us, unfortunately, tonight as she has a family emergency. So from all of us to you, Amanda, we love you. Prayers to you and your family, and you know the cabin crew and your listeners and fans and all of our listeners and fans are sending prayers to you and your family as well. So tonight, we are going to start off with some trivia. Who is ready for some trivia? Because I know I am, and I have some stumpers for you. First of all, let's bring in my co-host to make sure that they are good to go. We can hear everyone. And let's see, Courtney, Vicky, are you here with me?
Hello, I am here. Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
Can you hear me?
I hear you great. How are you guys doing? It's been a while, it seems.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah, we're doing well over here. Missing Amanda, obviously, but other than that,
Obviously.
all good.
Awesome. Good. And I hope that our cabin crew and listeners are doing well. So what I want to do today, we're going to start off with a little trivia, and then we're going to do a little get to know me segment. So you, the listeners, can maybe just get to a little bit to know about, well, who's in here? Courtney, me, and Vicky. Unfortunately, as I said, Amanda will not be joining us tonight, but she will be here next Tuesday, I'm sure. All goes well. But first, we're going to do the trivia. So as we have done trivia before here on the Conversation Cabin, I sent out to the private links to my friends and favorites to come in here where you can chat. So all of you are going to chat your answers, as well as Courtney and Vicky will as well. I always put a 10-second timer up. Of course, you'll know when it is because it's a Jeopardy tune. You can't miss it. So let me get into... So are we all ready? Let's go for question 1. What is the term for the study of paranormal phenomena such as ghosts and UFOs? Write your answer in the chat. You got 10 seconds. Go. All right. So I will tell you, a lot of you guys were totally right on the track. So I'm going to type it in since some of you were close, because it is kind of hard. It's like an L tongue twister. So let me try it. Paranormology, or paranormal investigation, as in the more culture today term. But here, I'm going to type it in for paranormalology. There you go. Something like that. Yeah. LOLOGY.
That makes more sense versus parapsychology, because I was thinking that's all I could think of. But also at the same time, that's the more like psychological research based approach where they're actively doing like experiments with like a test group. So it didn't make sense, but that's all I could think about. And I feel like a lot of us were in that same boat.
I totally am agreeing with you 100%. All right. So, hey, you guys did a great job, though. You were all on the same wavelength, to be honest. It's just the different end, I guess. So, number 2, in paranormal investigations, what device is commonly used to communicate with spirits? 10 seconds, go. All right, for all of you out there that said EVP or spirit box, you are right. Of course, all devices are in some way communicative, but I think what I was trying to get at with the question, maybe I should have been more specific, is communicating like back and forth pretty much. Like an EVP, you ask a question, they can talk back. But I mean, really, all of them can also touch something and light up something. But pretty much everybody, you know, your electronic equipment for ghost hunting. We definitely got some paranormal investigators in here. Always nice to know. All right, number 3. Which famous location is known as one of the most haunted places in the world? Now, yes, the answer can vary. So I will take 1, 2, 3. I will take 3 different answers.
Can I ask a clarification question?
Shoot.
Are you asking like in terms of like a geographical area or a specific building / location?
Building/location, and it can be anywhere in the world, not just United States.
Okay, cool.
All right, 10 seconds, go. All right. So again, which famous location is known as one of the most haunted places in the world? Now, I had written 3 down that when I had done the research, this is the 3. That's why I said either one of the 3, you'll get it right. Number 1, it could be the Stanley Hotel, which of course was known for inspiring Stephen King's The Shining. Of course, that's one of the most haunted places because it actually is connected to a book, a movie too. The Queen Mary, a retired ocean liner, which come on, the Queen Mary. I don't know if you all have watched some investigations on that place, but it is nuts. And last but not least, the Tower of London. But yes, all these places, of course, are haunted. I mean, they're all up there. But I was just seeing if anybody could pick the Queen Mary. So another one. What is the name of the theory that suggests some UFO sightings are actually advanced aircraft developed by human governments? So the question again, what is the name of the theory that suggests some UFO sightings are actually advanced aircraft developed by human governments? 10 seconds on the clock. All right. And the answer is black project theory or black budget theory. I don't think anyone got that right, but Drewski was almost getting there with Project Bluebeam. All right. So here's an easy one. In cryptozoology, what is the name of the legendary creature said to inhabit the waters of Loch Ness in Scotland? 10 seconds, go. All right. I love Stacy's answer. I think I dated her. Okay. So anyway, the creature is commonly known as, you got it right, the Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie, as she's commonly known as. Here is another question. Which famous paranormal investigator and demonologist inspired the creation of the Conjuring movie franchise? You have 10 seconds. Go. And who else, Stacy? It's paranormal investigator and demonologist. You guys got it. Lorraine and Ed Warren, one of the most amazing couple to ever really open our eyes to the other world as far as spirits and if demons exist. And that's actually a good question while we're on the topic. So, how many in the chat believe that there are demonic entities? Give me a little hand raise or a little thumbs up, whatever you got access to. Me? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And Courtney, I know you and I have talked, a lot about, demonic
Yeah.
entities. So I'm always very curious. I love the way that you, think of it. So explain how you think as far as the difference between demonic, negative, regular spirits. I mean, do you think there's a difference? Do you think that there is such a thing as demonic entities? And if so, explain why.
Right. So obviously, I think there is a distinct difference between spirits of like a human sense as well as demonic spirits or negative spirits. So the way that I kind of think about it is you have your average ordinary person who has passed on, whether or not they have chosen to stay here on purpose or if they were unfortunately they may be unaware that they're a spirit. So you have those people and they can either be negative spirits or positive spirits, not necessarily like evil or malevolent spirits, but just not happy or necessarily nice. And then you have the inhuman side of things, which would be the demonic activity that I hate to say we commonly see it, but a lot of people claim that they've had interactions with demons and stuff like that. I'm sure there are plenty of um, investigators who have had interactions with demons and stuff like that, but for the most part, they aren't, at least in my opinion, very common. But when you have a demonic infestation, it's very apparent. Farah, does that make sense in the way that I described that?
Perfectly does. And I go back to our conversation with Anna Maria Manello, who is that screenwriter and author that I communicate a lot with. I mean, she really, especially with my hauntings, especially here at the property in the cave in the house, just her knowledge of seeing the difference, it's just like normal people. Yes, if you're grumpy in person in your real life, you're going to be grumpy afterwards. That doesn't mean it's a demonic
Right.
spirit. It's a negative spirit. But there are people that kind of go a little bit overboard, cutting their skin and putting blood and smearing it on a Ouija board and trying to conjure up things. I mean, Aleister Crowley was one of the people that I had done a story on back when I first started podcasting. I'm very intrigued by him because, I mean, he's just, he kind of makes you look at it in a different way. It's, not always it's the Wicca and things like that. It's not always to be negative. It can be used in negative ways. So
Exactly.
I believe that demons can be conjured up because I mean, first of all, if you believe in God, how can you
You
not
have to.
believe in demons?
Right, you have to. And the other thing that's worth mentioning there is it's all about intention. If you are intending to conjure up a spirit that is, I shouldn't even say spirit. If you're intending to conjure up a demon, careful what you wish for because it's very likely that that could happen. But also at the same time, another thing that I like to think about when it comes to is this a negative spirit or is it demonic is like if you go to a haunted prison, you have to realize that the majority of the people who live there and are likely haunting there are very, very bad souls. But that doesn't make them demonic. It just makes them evil people. I don't know if that kind of clarifies things, but
Perfectly. And that's exactly what my point is on, how we have talked about before that everybody and their mother on YouTube wants to label their paranormal investigation my demonic encounter. You shouldn't do that, because the more you keep trying to manifest that everything is demonic, if it's something that touches you or touches your gauges and your meters, then you're going to manifest, I think, more demons into our realm. If you keep always mentioning that that's who you're going to see, even at a nice place like, the Mackey Mansion or, well, I know the Bel Air house does have demons there, but you know what I'm trying to say. There's more places that are nice and light filled happiness, no murders have taken place, but yet they'll still be like, oh, our encounter with a demon. Well, how do you know it's a demon? And it just always drives me crazy. But Vicky, I'd like to know what your take is on that.
So, can you hear me very well?
I hear you perfectly clear.
Okay, good. So, like, my stance on, like, with that, what you just said, I think people have, like, a major curiosity for what's beyond this life. Like, there's people out there that they're like, oh, God, God, God. Okay, great. And then there's people out there that are like, the devil, the demons. And then, as you also mentioned, Courtney, like the spirits, there's a difference in all that. And then you have others who are very, like, in doubt of all of it. But then, like, at the same time, you have those people who are also in that position of like, well, I want to know if there's something more to this world. And so of course they're going to be doing something, conjuring up something that they're not supposed to. But I think it's just more on the fact that because people are curious, and they just want proof of life, some sort of existence outside of our lifetime.
It does. And I think that's what makes us great to collaborate on, because we are, we think the same in certain aspects and we're different in others. And I think that makes us four do very well on collaborating with stories, because we get to see from different angles. And that's another part where I had said earlier in the show at the beginning that I wanted to let our listeners kind of know maybe a little bit more about us. So what I decided to do was let Vicky and Courtney know I want you to write 2 truths and a lie about yourself. And then we're going to try to have the listeners see which one is the lie, of course. So let's see. Vicky, since Vicky has a lot of talking to do coming up here, we'll let Courtney go first. So Courtney, I want you to go ahead and read just all 3 together, like, da-dun, da-dun, da-dun. Don't say it where it's, a space in between where the one's going to be the lie to give anybody the answer.
Okay.
Just read them, and then I'll put the 10 seconds on the clock. And listeners, go ahead and try to pick which one is the lie from Courtney. So Courtney, take it away.
Cool. So I'm scared of the dark. I've been researching the paranormal for about 8 years, and my favorite movie is The Sixth Sense. Take your guesses.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, so Sixth Sense, starting in 8 years. What was the first one you said, Courtney?
I'm scared of the dark.
Okay, so we're going to label it like this. A is scared of the dark. B is that you've been researching the paranormal for 8 years, right? And then C is your favorite movie is The Sixth Sense. Is that the order that you said?
Yep, that's correct.
All right. Well, then, listeners, I want you to put A, B, or C. What do you think the lie is? I'll put 10 seconds on the clock. All right, Courtney. So survey the answers and tell us which one is the lie.
So I'm not gonna lie, like Vicky knows me probably best. The Shining is my favorite movie. I am in fact scared of the dark because I've just seen some shit in it, I'm not gonna lie. And then yeah, I've been researching the paranormal for just about 8 years, give or take like a couple of months, obviously. But C was the lie.
Awesome. Congratulations, Vicky. Boo
Whoop,
boo.
whoop.
Anybody else get it?
I don't think so. I
No,
went
everybody
back
else.
through. A lot of people thought B. Always been like a fan of like horror and stuff like that, but I never really got into the research side of things and looking into theories and different, paranormal happenings until right around the time I was like my later years of high school. So, yeah, it's been about 8 years.
I knew that one was true, but I had thought I said A because I was like, how is she scared of the dark when she writes such scary freaking stories?
That's
And she
exactly
has
why.
a haunted house.
Right.
She has a haunted house.
Right. It's more of like, even, when I was a kid and experiencing paranormal activity, it always happened in the dark. And even now as an adult. So I'm unfortunately not the most comfortable in the dark. I do sleep with all of the lights off in my house. It's not like a detriment to my health, but, I don't particularly like being in dark places.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I'm going to go next because that way Vicky will go and then I will introduce Vicky before she starts on this awesome episode that we have coming. So here are my guesses. All right. So I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I once did a backflip off a 10-foot high sliding board and landed it perfect on 2 feet. And I was going to go to the Navy and become a lawyer. Go ahead. All right. So let me look at the answers. Okay. Courtney and Beyond the Shadows. You got it right. Yes, I do. My bachelor's degree in psychology. I have a bachelor's degree, but it's in business administration with my major in marketing, my minor in advertising. Close
I
though.
knew
Wow.
that. I'm so proud of myself.
Awesome. Ding, ding, ding. I love it. All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed a little trivia, a little get to know us. And we'll do that again next Tuesday. I kind of want to do another two truths and a lie because I think it's really great if our listeners not only know our voice, but know a little bit about us. I think it makes our stories even come through better to them because then they know a little bit about what makes us tick, what we're interested in. And I find that intriguing when you're looking for a podcast. You want to listen to a podcast with people that you have some similarities in, some differences in, maybe someone that can open your eyes a little bit more. As Stacy always tells me, I've been opening her eyes a little bit more, not to new truths or anything, just for her to kind of look at more, you know, possible answers, and I love Stacy how she brought that to my attention because that's exactly what I try to do. I try to get people just to kind of go outside the box, and if you tell me that it is not this, then tell me what it is. Until you can tell me what it is with your evidence and your proof, then I'll stay with my evidence and my proof. That's what I always say. But so in this episode 2, we are going to be digging into the grays. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our friend and fellow podcaster, the host of the captivating show, Mrs. Spooky Obsessed, Vicky. Now, with a deep passion for all things spooky, Vicky will take us on a thrilling exploration of haunted destinations, restless spirits, legends, folklore, and the very meaning behind our beloved spooky culture on her show. From books to movies, she fearlessly dives into historical facts, unearthing the secrets that lie within the shadows. Vicky's show is an enchanting blend of storytelling, research, and personal charm. She invites us to confront our fears, celebrate our fascination with the macabre, and discover the beauty in our shared spooky heritage. As we embark on this thrilling adventure with Vicky, the host of the fantastic show Mrs. Spooky Obsessed, prepared to be enthralled, enchanted, and perhaps a little spooked as we delve into the mysteries that lie just beyond our sight. A big member of our Paranormal Project family, I introduce Vicky. Take it away, Vicky.
Well, thank you so much for that, Farah. Like, I actually like that introduction. I want you to be writing my stories now. So, anyway,
You know, I always give you guys a good introduction because you all deserve it.
I love it. I love it so much. Like, you just put like a big fat smile on my face. And now my spirits are lifted and I'm not tired anymore.
Awesome. Well, good to hear it.
Alrighty, so let's get started with gray aliens. So I'm gonna admit this kind of took me about like 2 days worth of research. I kind of have like about 6 pages worth of like information. I hope you're okay with that, Farah.
This is why we do this, is because we're putting all the information that we can find out there for everyone to make their own, get their own answers, I guess you want to say. So the more the better, Vicky.
All right, awesome. So let's get started. Gray aliens fall under a few different names, such as Zeta Reticulans, the Roswell Greys, or just simply the Greys. They are commonly known to be the types of beings frequently experienced when it comes to alien abductions and close encounters of the third kind. The description varies from person to person, however, their features are about the same in all generations and cultures around the world. Many people who encounter gray aliens describe them as having almost human like features, but they have like these small bodies, big bottomless black eyes, a smooth gray colored skin texture, and large round bald heads. And I'm pretty sure you know more or less what I'm talking about because it's a type of image you see everywhere. Although they have these humanoid features, what makes them physically totally different from us is that they lack noses, they lack ears, and they also lack genital organs. One couple in 1961 popularized the gray aliens as their story goes that they were driving down an empty winding road of the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and a strange light from the night sky followed them. Unbeknownst to them, next thing they know, they're gone. Suddenly, they come home by 5 in the morning when originally they were supposed to come home around 2 or 3 a.m. with their clothes ripped, feeling uncomfortably dirty, and 2 hours of their lives missing. The name of this case is known by none other than the Barney and Betty Hill abduction. We can sit here and say that the origin story of the gray aliens, or at least the popular image of the gray aliens, may have actually come from this couple. Remember, okay, sorry. Remember at the beginning, I started off with the statement that gray aliens are also known as Zeta Reticulans? This
Yes,
is
ma'am.
yeah, this is based on a map Betty Hill drew under hypnosis where the gray aliens claim to be their home location. This is due to a conversation she was supposedly having with them. The star map is actually so accurate to the star system of the Zeta Reticuli. So the original Latin term Zeta Reticuli is based on a large binary star system in the southern constellation of the Reticulum. What does that mean? There are two stars in our solar system, namely Zeta 1 and Zeta 2, that parallel opposite of each other and are said to be about 39 light years away from planet Earth. They actually can be seen at night if you were to map your stars correctly, and they belong to the Zeta Hercules or Herculi moving group. So, okay, we got the gist of the scientific definition behind that name. What about the gray aliens and how do they tie into the couple I just mentioned? Betty
Well,
and Barney
first,
Hill.
can I
Uh huh.
can I
Yeah.
interject real quick because you just taught me something that I didn't know, and it kind of makes perfect sense. So, first of all, thank you. One thing out of any time that I've ever researched gray aliens, Vicky, I did not know that they don't have any genitals of some sort, and it kind of makes me wonder. Remember last Tuesday where we talked about the Stan Romanek story, where he was one of the gentlemen that had like this little alien humanoid girl calling him because it was her daddy.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of goes with the Benny and Barney story of the fact that they were trying to, um, stab her in her abdomen, like through her belly button, to do like reproductive experiments on her
Mm-hmm.
because they can't reproduce. Is that what you're getting from that? Is that like from all your research I don't know, do you guys think what I'm thinking? Like, does that mean what I'm thinking?
I mean, it could actually be that. Like, I saw a few videos based on them, how I feel like I don't want to give so much away, but like, let me give you the gist of what I somewhat understood from the video. So, like, the aliens, they inserted this sort of like long not tube, but like a needle through her belly button as a sort of like a pregnancy test. Why? I mean, I'm not too sure. Maybe it's what you just said. It's to kind of differentiate themselves from us, that we have like these sex organs and they don't.
Right. And that's what I'm wondering is that usually the grays um, are more of the ones that abduct to do the experiments. And these women that have come out and said that they've carried their children, like they've been taken by the grays, taken up to the mothership, been asked to hold their baby and nurture it and love it. And then they have to go back home. And that's just weird that in all these years, I never thought to put those two together, but then you ask, how do they procreate? How do they replicate themselves? Or is there just one? Where do they come
Well,
from? Like,
That is
come
pretty
from, come
wild, but
from.
yeah.
yeah, that's the one thing where I'm like, how would it be possible? But I mean, if they're coming from, I mean, I doubt it, but let's say a similar planet to our own, could they not have just evolved as, you know, single cell organisms and kind of gone through this evolutionary
Like,
process? I feel like that
like a
can't be
toad?
possible though. Yeah,
Like,
maybe. It's weird.
let me ask the listeners, type in some answers. What do you think now that you hear? And remember, when I did the video yesterday for advertising, did you see the percentages that I put on there? Grays are responsible for more of the percentage of abductions than any other one. And it makes me even go back to Amanda's story where she said about that whole sign on the dotted line, the president, and, trading off and able to experiment, and they give us technology. It's just, I don't know. I just had a burst of like a ball because of the one thing that Vicky said. And now it's like everything's coming together that, oh, wow, these are the ones that are experimenting on us. They're more the ones that abduct us. They're because, and even when they do like the cow mutilations, what are they always taking out of the cows and the horses? The reproductive systems. It just seems like that's what they're after because they can't do it on their own. I don't know. It just made me spark a light bulb above my head.
Right.
So the
Can I ask
response. Oh,
too? Sorry, Vicky. I
no,
feel
that's
like we
fine.
keep cutting you off, but obviously with the Greys, there's so much varying information. Um, but going back to Betty and Barney Hill, do you mind clarifying? Did Betty have any like? I don't think she did. She didn't have a background in like astronomy or anything like that, did she? To where she'd be able to accurately map that without any sort of intervention.
So there was like a couple things I did read online about like a lot of people's speculation about the couple. Even the researchers, like these scientific researchers who were like trying to investigate them and their story, they were trying to kind of make a connection like, okay, like their story, it's actually pretty valid. Like, how long could it have possibly taken for this couple to try to, if you want to say like, fake their story just to kind of
Right.
like throw their name out there to the public?
And that's real dedication. Like David said, she was a social worker. So I don't know why she would need to have a vast knowledge of the stars and the cosmos in general. It just seems like, especially back then, it doesn't seem like something that would be in her repertoire. I mean, obviously it's possible, but
I do
Well,
get a little more into their story later into my research. I want to say, but I'm like, no, I need to read out the rest of my stuff in order for you to understand what.
Well, this is all what we do. We talk about it. We just don't hear. We want to talk about it and converse it and answer our own questions that we have. And that was a great question, Courtney. But I actually did see the blonde-haired lady that she's a little older now, but she's family with Benny and Barney Hill, and she's the one that always talks for them these days because she's alive, of course. But I do remember specifically her saying that no, she had no background in astrology. And this wasn't even something that NASA had really even discovered yet for her to pick that out. So that was kind of weird right there, which was an actual good validation, like Vicky said, that she had no knowledge of astrology like that. Go ahead,
Oh, I'm
Vicky.
sorry. I thought like we were gonna continue talking. Yeah. So let me go ahead and read off what I have. So Betty and Barney Hill underwent hypnosis, my bad, in 1964 to recover memories of their time when they were abducted by beings unfamiliar to this universe. While under hypnosis, a series of drawings and sketches were produced to give a better visual of what they claim to have dealt with 3 years prior, right? So I'm talking about when they got abducted in 1964. Now they're having like a hypnosis experiment in 19. Oh my God, I'm all over the place. 1961 they were abducted. 1964 they were under hypnosis, right? So the images I found over the internet claiming to be authentically real and belonging to Barney Hill himself were in such great detail that in 1990, a man by the name of Martin Kottmeyer, I can't really say his name well enough, who was known to debunk alien abduction stories, he stated that the drawings depicted as gray aliens were extremely similar to a character from a show called The Outer Limits, which was a television series that aired from 1963 to 1965. But one episode in particular, called The Bolero Shield, came out 12 days prior to their hypnosis experiment, which people think it may have inspired Barney's supposed encounter with gray aliens. So, or so they say. Because of this, most people think that the eyes, like that's what, I don't know why they were so focused on that, but that the eyes of the alien in the drawing is based on what the sketch artist could have used through supposedly his understanding and may have somewhat used the eyes based on the Outer Limits show that could have, again, inspired specific facial features. Remember, at this time, sketch artists were more than likely drawing what they were familiar with. We can't say for sure if these artists were actually drawing what they knew unless it's based on their imagination from real life experiences. Regardless of the naysayers, Barney and Betty Hill, without a doubt, received great publicity from this event. Although they didn't plan on it, their story captured audiences' attention around the globe. However, experiment aside, people over the internet speculate that gray aliens are actually human beings from the future, or that they're a type of human species from another dimension, and that the skin color is that of something like Terminator. If you're familiar with the movie, I hope in a way that gives you an image. So they say it's not skin, nor is it a color. It's theorized that they're machines from another world. Like, these are wild theories to base oneself on. We can't conclude for sure if it was being said, if what is being said is true or not. Sorry. But they are very similar to the descriptions portrayed in famous books decades prior. So this
Can
leads
I
me to the great
ask a
alien
quick
origin
question?
story. Mm-hmm.
So you mean that there's a theory where the gray aliens are more of like droids, for lack of better word?
Actually, I came across like I don't know how many theories because like I'm only talking about short gray aliens. This is not including that I even found like tall gray aliens, and
Right.
that those short gray aliens are just like a clone, a midget clone of those tall aliens. So that's why I brought this up, that supposedly they think that these are beings from the future, or that they may be robots, like you said, drones,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Well, the other thing too that kind of goes back to the question we were asking earlier, how do they reproduce? If they are a machine, it's possible that they were just built and for maybe modesty's sake they don't have genitalia. Um I it just kind of struck that thought for me when you said that it was possible that they were drones or robots, but maybe that's a wild theory that I'm connecting. I'm not sure.
It
And
makes sense, if anything.
it's also something weird to think about, Courtney, that you just mentioned, well, both you guys mentioned about it, that they could be robots. Everyone is so scared about AI these
Oh my
days
god,
and
I'm
what it could
terrified.
possibly do. And if you think, what's the big thing about space and time is that it comes back around. What goes around comes around. So it's almost like saying that maybe they are part of our future and this is what ended up as us down the line.
I
And then they're
Could
coming
be.
back to just help us live through the rest of this shithole.
I hate that. I mean, like, it makes sense too, and kind of going off of that, they say that time happens, kind of all at once, but we as, mere mortals experience it on a linear scale. So, I mean, who's to say that that's not the case, as scary as it is to think?
Exactly. And that's what I love about doing. Yes, gray aliens have probably been burnt out on stories, but look, it's the information that we've just talked about in the past 10 minutes. Like, there's some things I didn't even know. So it's just, this is where you have to gather everything that you hear and, make your own assumption of, are they real? Are they not? But like I said before, I do think that there are other extraterrestrial beings out there, humanoids out there other than us. Just don't know exactly where they're from or when they're here. But that's what our investigative know-how does, is we try to get these answers. But it would be very scary to know that if people are warning us now about AI and then we get taken over by them and they're the grays, oh my gosh, I don't even know. Like, you can go off into a whole different world with
It
that.
could be possible what you just said, Farah, but we're so like now. I'll believe it when I see it. We're those type of people. So regardless if they're beings from the future coming to warn us about like the pending doomsday that's already around the corner, we're still not going to believe it, or at least most people they're not going to believe.
Oh, you're right. You're right. The majority of people, it's all, well, we just think that we're so privileged. It's our right to be here. So then
Exactly.
we're here and no one else is here but us.
Mhm.
That right there is the wrong way of thinking, because, first of all, I mean, like Courtney said, there could be single cell organisms that grow on their own that we don't know. We don't know what they've brought back from space. We don't know what we've taken up to space. We don't know. You think anyone is going to come out and say what they've cloned or created? You're out of your mind. So, but great information so far, Vicky. I love it.
Thank you. So this is where I communicate with y'all on pop, ugh, pop culture media. History has it that the first story of the gray aliens goes all the way back to the 19th century. So, first introduction was in 1898 with a novel called Meta, Meda, a Tale of the Future, published by Kenneth Follingsby. It's a story in which the narrator encounters small, gray skinned aliens with balloon shaped heads. Now, another one is in 1893, and I'm pretty sure y'all know this guy, famous author H.G. Wells. He presented a description of humanity's future appearance in the article called The Man of the Year Million, describing humans as having tiny mouths, no nose, no hair, large heads, and large hands. In 1917, occultist Aleister Crowley, which you had just mentioned at the beginning, claimed to have had a meeting with a preternatural entity named Lam, Lam, that was similar in appearance to a modern gray alien. He believed he had contacted this entity through a process called the Alamantra workings. I'm not too sure if what I said is similar or correlates to what you had previously already talked about in one of your episodes, Farah. But he thought this sort of thing. He thought this allowed humans to contact beings from outer space and across dimensions. Because of this, other occultists and ufologists claim to have also retroactively linked Lamb to later Gray encounters and say they have had their own visitations from him, with one describing Lamb having a cold, computer like intelligence and utterly beyond human comprehension. But what really took hold and kept the image of the gray alien to the wide public was that of a Swedish novelist named Gustav Sandgren. Okay, if I butchered that name, please forgive
I was
me.
gonna
I'm just
say, I
reading
feel
it in
like
the way I would in Spanish.
I feel like you said that so like fluently and beautifully. Like I wish you guys could have seen my reaction because I was very impressed.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I don't know how you would actually pronounce that name in Swedish. I'm just saying it as how I would read it in Spanish. So he wrote a book under the pen name Gabriel Linde, publishing a sci fi novel called The Unknown Danger. He describes a race of extraterrestrial beings who wore clothes made out of soft gray fabric. They were short with big bald heads and had large, dark, gleaming eyes. This novel, with intentions aiming at young readers, included illustrations of the imagined aliens that would later become the template upon which the popular image of gray aliens is based upon. So, with that said, let's get back to our famous couple. Barney and Betty Hill is a case that made abductions famous. They're the first claimants of alien abductions in the US. Their story is that they were missing for 2 hours. So they had this gap in their memory and it frustrated them so much. They sought hypnosis to retrieve back that timeline missing from their lives. It is said that they described a detailed experience that included a pregnancy test and other forms of medical exams. Their experience supposedly caused a secret Air Force inquiry called Project Blue Book that investigated UFO sightings across the US. Because of the hills, the rest literally becomes history. And so, for every alien abduction story that has happened um, since then, gave the scientific field as well as the general public a different understanding of alien visitation, alien abduction, and how we communicate our stories or our experiences about gray alien encounters. Barney and I'm sorry.
I
Go
was
ahead.
just going to say something real quick. If you've ever heard Barney on the tape that his, what do they call that again? A hypnotherapist or something that takes him back
Mm-hmm.
to that day where they were, to hear a man scream the way that he did just goes to show that if that really did happen, by God, was it traumatizing for him? Have you ever heard that, guys?
I haven't heard of that, but the way you described it kind of brings me back to the discussion we had last week where we were kind of talking about, is that do you think these people are telling the truth? If you are screaming like that during hypnotherapy where you're supposed to be in this meditative state, you can bet your bottom dollar that is a genuine response. That's all.
Exactly. I mean, if you're wanting to make it up, and I've seen, documentaries where it's someone that make it up, they're kind of calm and they'll talk a lot and they'll be like, uh, uh. This man screamed his head off and was screaming his wife's name. And he's another man in front of another man because the hypnotherapist was a man and is screaming in front of him, which, a man back in the 60s, that's when men were alpha males, where their wives did let them, be non-equal in the house. The man went out to work and the woman, abided and obeyed her husband and everything. So for a man to scream in front of another man like that, if he was making it up, this just doesn't seem like that would be the case. I mean, and again, that's my thoughts, but if anyone has not seen that or heard that, I suggest you go to YouTube and type up the Benny and Barney Hill hypnotherapist session or something along those lines and listen to it because it is on YouTube. And to hear both of them is pretty jaw dropping, to be honest.
It's I like that you brought that out there because upon one of the videos I did watch that they undergo the hypnosis, and instead of being so calm as you had mentioned, just trying to walk through that supposed memory, they they like you said, he was screaming. They both were pretty much reliving their experience all over again, but this time in a different light where they know exactly what's going on, because during the time that they were abducted, they it's blank in their minds, right? But then under hypnosis, they get to actually see what's going on, like for the first time, in a somewhat waking state, but not really exactly awake. And they, like I said, they just relive that experience in full this time around. And that's the reason why Barney was really like panicky over his hypnosis.
Another reason to also say on how much I lean toward that it really happened to them, because they didn't, they didn't want that in their life, especially for, I mean, let's talk about the elephant in the room. A interracial couple back in the 60s. Do you really think they wanted to have the spotlight on them for something like that? Where on top of the interracial and the whole racism that was going that we were fighting against in the 60s, that they wanted to be called crazy on top of that? You have to really think about that.
It's
Yeah, I
also just
mean, I'm
like,
glad you brought that up.
yeah, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say that was a very traditional time. And to kind of already live your life truly to yourself and who you are, even if that does go against the grain, to add on top of that with, I hate to say it, kind of outlandish claims, especially for the era, like, why would you do that unless it was true,
Exactly. That's my point, is like, I just don't, you have to think of, how many asylums have closed down from back in the day. And remember who used to be dropped off at asylums. A man could drop his wife off and vice versa if they just talked too much, if they bitched too much, if they drank too much. So again, you don't want to have a couple putting the spotlight on themselves and becoming crazy. For God's sakes, their family could have dropped them off at a poor farm asylum house and they could have been there for the rest of their lives. So you like whenever you try to look at the if a story is true or not, you got to really try to dig up as much as you can about the people. And Vicky, you're doing such a great job putting Barney and Betty. It was just this innocent little old couple. I don't know. They looked like late 30s, early 40s. I mean, but again, you just go back to those times in the 60s where it was whites only bathrooms. And, that was a lot for an interracial couple to be together and to make an outlandish story like that. You don't even know what would have happened to them if they would have been so outspoken about it. They were to a point of trying to get some answers for themselves, but it's not like they were, invited to NASA and did this for 15 years and their research and stuff and it's going on a hoax. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I kind of look at it that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're pretty spot on, if anything. Like, I was actually about to introduce them as the type of people they were and what they did. So, Barney Hill was a postal service worker, but also a civil rights leader. Betty Hill, on the other hand, was a social worker and a civil rights activist. Betty was this white woman who was actually 3 years older than her black husband. So both are a biracial couple, as you had already mentioned. And let's face it, we're still in an era where it was frowned upon for whites and blacks to be romantically involved. And it was also kind of odd for many people at this time to see a woman to be dating a younger man, even though it's just only 3 years difference. It's always been so traditional to have like a man older than the woman, than the wife, right? Let alone the fact that they had a common background for church and the civil rights movement, because they were very much involved with their faith. The time that um, the time that they were alive is the decade where people were seeking love and peace, right? Make love, not war. The war that shook the world. I mean, does that ring a bell? I'm talking about the Vietnam War that lasted literally 20 years and it didn't end until 1975. During their time of their incident, they were actually on a delayed honeymoon. They were 16 months married and they had no time together. They found a break and they took advantage of it. But within their little honeymoon, it spiraled into a twisted turn of events not one or the other saw coming. The light that followed them was out of nowhere and sudden. Both at first had assumed it was a shooting star, but it got closer and brighter. Barney saw and thought, well, there's nothing to worry about. He was an avid plane watcher and a World War II vet. He would say things like, oh, it's just a satellite. It probably went off course. But in this cat and mouse chase, they finally hit a stop and couldn't believe their eyes. It was a disc like object that they had never seen before. And what happened? Time goes missing for them. After this, within a year, they started to have a series of issues. Hold on. Betty was basically having nightmares of the incident where it was probably leaking memory into her dreams, and Barney was developing an ulcer and anxiety. So they sought mental help, thus hypnosis, because it was such a popular technique at this time. Betty's first memory is that they were abducted by short guys with black hair and noses like Jimmy Durant's. However, it was with Barney we get this popular gray alien image because his version of the alien encounter captured the attention of the world more than Betty's. Yet he was a man who didn't believe in such things. He was like, no, there's no such thing. He was more reclusive about his experience, while Betty was more descriptive. His gray alien encounter had a popular stance that over the course of 60 years, Hollywood developed sci fi shows like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and The X Files based on his experience. After Barney's representation of his abductees, Betty never again claimed the Jimmy Durant's nose look-alike story. she somehow began to have the same visions as her husband later on. I tried studying their case more closely, and their experience was odd in a way, but the more I tried getting information on them and the gray aliens put together, Wikipedia was literally the only website that gave me a detailed explanation, and I don't like Wikipedia. It didn't matter what other web browser I was using, Wikipedia was that only go to page. Other than that, I was getting Reddit and repeated information on other websites. Like it was strange, like how I was trying to do my research on this. However, sightings of unidentified flying objects can actually be dated all the way back to 1638, or at least the first ever on record by Governor John Winthrop, yeah, of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He reported, or he put on journal, ugh, he put on journal that other men saw two lights in the sky and they were hearing disembodied voices over water. It was a short story. There wasn't a lot to be found, but it is said that the majority of alien encounters happen more frequently with those who speak heavily in English than any other language. In 19th century America, there was a caseload of people confronting spaceships in the sky. One of the more famous cases is what happened on January 22nd, 1878, where Texas farmer John Martin said he saw a flying saucer in the sky. By the end of the 1800s, many Californians themselves also claimed to have seen fast moving spaceships in the sky as well. The thing about this period of this century is that society went from having creepy stories and fairy abductions and other supernatural encounters to now beginning to shift into stories based on extraterrestrial beings that are far more advanced into their technology based on other emerging technologies happening in real life from the Industrial Revolution. Due to this, many people were slowly moving away from the idea of the existence of the supernatural. Then all of a sudden, it stops. No one is having an experience or an encounter with UFOs up until the 1940s to the 1960s. The United States, Germany, Norway, France, Finland, and Italy were now experiencing a sudden wave of UFOs. This period was known to be the flying saucer era. However, historians and researchers alike indicate that this may have been the fact that we were all suffering the Cold War, which began in 1947 and ended in 1991. Now, that's a long time if you ask me. And claimed that people were actually experiencing missiles that were originating from the Soviet Union, and said that people may have actually been confusing them. Another theory is speculated what might have influenced the spark and scare of UFO sightings may have factored in from the media itself, movies and television. Let's face it, guys, there were quite a number of alien movies and shows like The Twilight Zone that introduced strange unknown life force beings. This is definitely outside of our comfort zones, and it's so typical of Hollywood, the where they're always trying to do something outside the norm. Plus, let's not forget that I already mentioned the introduction of sci-fi books that also shaped society, where it sparked imaginations for future cultural references. Now, remember I mentioned the term the Roswell Grays? I didn't get to find so much information. I wish I did. So on July 8th, 1947, we had ourselves the Roswell incident, where unknown gray matter material was found outside of Roswell, and the US military was so quick to tell the public that it was nothing more than a weather balloon. But what was that material found, and were there aliens included? Because as much as they want to tell the world that dummies were involved, dummies were not being used in scientific experiments in 1947. They didn't like it actually became a common thing in the early 50s. So they're still fucking around with us somehow and still lying to us.
You
You know, the
also
Well,
first
if
man.
I oh go go ahead,
I
Courtney.
was just gonna say that sorry, Farrah, we may have the same thought here, but we talked about the Roswell incident in our first kind of series when we talked about the different ranches in the Uinta Basin, right? And we talked about it then, saying that why would they have dummies inside of what they called a weather balloon? Like, regardless of when they were used, whether it was the 50s or even later than that, it still doesn't make sense why they would put, like, essentially what were mannequins in a weather balloon. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And I've never understood that. And I was going to add with that. Remember also when we talked about we were back in that Mysteries of the UNA, uh the fact that there were beings that were found. And in more research recently, Josh Gates had that letter more examined that was in that officer's hand that was kneeling down in front of the aluminum looking like stuff from the craft, and it had mentioned the victims. So why would that be in that letter? The victims, other than there were victims that they found in that UFO crash, and it was a UFO crash.
No idea.
Right. I just don't none of it makes sense to me, but I'm sorry, Vicky, we just kinda I had to jump in there and talk about
No
that because
issue at all. You
it
go ahead and
doesn't
say what you need to say.
it just doesn't make sense to me, but please.
Yeah, no problem. So, the first man who reported the sightings of gray aliens in 1957 was a Brazilian farmer named Antonio Villas Boas. Did I even say that right? Antonio Villas Boas. Yeah, whatever. He claims a red light was shining upon him, taking him into an unknown aircraft where he comes across short alien beings with gray metallic clothing that did physical and sexual experiments on him. His story wasn't as famous or as sensational until Barney and Betty Hill in the 1960s, which there was only a few years difference. As I previously mentioned, they are the first to popularize as well as publicizing the embodiment of common gray alien imagery since then. I mean, from then on. Since then, we have not turned that page and we've kept our focus on our versions of aliens looking like this. I guess it's a lot more comforting to console the idea that if there are other life forms out there, we would rather that they look somewhat like us, something that is familiar instead of a different shape, because that's what makes it scarier, right? Facing something completely um, unholy or against the name of God. And although we have evolved in our ways of research and thinking when it comes to outside life forms, we're still not ready to believe that there are things beyond this world that could possibly be born and bred differently outside of our understanding. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the ending of my research.
Let me get some claps in there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome job. Awesome job. Standing ovation. And that's another thing too, just like you had said, I loved how you worded the end there. We have to realize we have to open up and think we are not the only ones that are here. We don't know exactly what all is here, but we have to come to that conclusion that we cannot be just us, and that's it. But anybody have any questions for Vicky? I'm going to go back through the chat here and just see
Is there
and see what
can
people
I
have
can
said.
I add a little bit something? I guess it gives people the time to go ahead and think about their questions a bit.
Hmm.
So, guess what? I went to history.com to get a full story of their incident and like Betty and Barney Hill, right? And it recently got updated on August 1st of 2023. For us, that was exactly a week ago
What?
to the day we had our Nordic alien talk. The
That's
last time
terrifying.
that website, yeah, the last time that website got updated was 5 years ago in 2018. I'm speculating there's something in their story that may have been taken out, deleted, added, or what have you. Just because it got recently updated does not mean it is keeping up to date. It feels more like the government is still doing us so dirty. And what a coincidence, because our own US government just publicized possibly the idea that aliens are real,
Dude,
um, due to a whistleblower, right? But do you want to know
right.
something? I thought, let me find the exact date when it was a social media buzz with Congress making such a claim. And guess what's odd? Like on my end, it was weird. As soon as I searched the date, there was a website called The Hill. And I was tying that to Barney and Betty Hill, right?
Mhm.
And the top article attached to it was called, Did the Government Confirm Aliens Exist? The way it was on my end, it was strangely
It was
coincidental. I was
kismet.
like, yeah, I was like, nah, there cannot be some sort of way that there's a puzzle coming in together. I'm over
Oh
here
my
thinking it's
God.
just regular research, but within my time studying this case, I feel like I was going down a rabbit hole because every time I kept going on other websites that were in relation to this couple, it would either take forever to load and say that the internet was not working, or I would get an error message. Other websites were telling me that this web page does not exist, and others had like these huge ads covering the entire story. It wasn't letting me read. I feel like I was close to finding out something about this couple and their experience with gray aliens, but I guess I was not supposed to because I just kept getting roadblock. So it must meant or it must mean I was looking in the right places to get my info.
Right.
That
You
is
guys also have to
crazy.
you guys also have to think that like we picked this topic out just for the listeners at home. We picked this topic out well before we were done with our last series on the Virginia City Chronicles, right? Like we've had this picked out for probably close to 2 months now. And literally the week that we decided we were going to drop our first episode was the same week that that congressional hearing happened. It was bizarre. Obviously that didn't happen because of us, but I cannot stop thinking about that.
Yeah, no, it's
And
very
as a
weird.
reminder, I also have government Apache helicopters and Black Hawk always going over my property too. So that always makes you think of that too. It just, you always wonder what they're listening on your phone through TikTok, Instagram. What do they see us doing? Do they have someone like kind of listening on a whole bunch of podcasts? And what are they talking about? I mean, they have to. They have to,
Right.
right?
Big Brother's always watching. And like I
Always.
said, that
Ex-
doesn't mean that they came out with this congressional hearing because of us. That is not what I'm trying to
oh,
say. I know it
God,
kind of
no.
sounded like that, but like it's just like bizarre to me that this is kind of coming up now just as we're starting to talk about this. It's almost like we had some kind of foresight that this would be pertinent information for our audiences
Mhm.
to know.
Definitely. And you know what? I looked up on YouTube. So if anybody wants to go and listen to the Barney Hill hypnosis session, when you go to YouTube, just type in Barney Hill hypnosis 01, and it's on a YouTube channel called UFO History. And you can hear his 40-minute and I think there's more than one, of course, but this one that I was listening to not long ago, um, it's pretty terrifying. And even the first comment that somebody wrote, aliens or not, these poor people were clearly traumatized by something. So that just goes to show you that when you listen to Barney's voice, and you keep in mind he's a middle-aged man, um, works for the government. He's a postal worker, married. Um, he's not doing this for a hoax. I can't see that.
Let's not forget that he was a also part of the, for equality
Civil
movement.
rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, why would you do that, especially when your wife is an activist as well and you're fighting for equal rights for the races? You wouldn't want any bad press because then, you know what I mean? They're going to come back and say you're crazy. Well, we're not going to listen to you. What do you know? So, very good story, Vicky. As always, this is why we were brought together. I think we're always on the same wavelength as far as where we go with these stories and how we put it out there. I think you did a great job with research again. You always do. All of us, it's you have to be here every Tuesday and hear Courtney, hear Amanda, because it also gets you to know them more too on how they write, how they do their podcast. Please go and listen to Mrs. Spooky Obsessed podcast, of course. Amanda, One Nothing, and Courtney from Hans. Just a little tidbit. Remember, sharing is caring. So make sure that you share our show, whether it's an episode that you like, send it out to friends and family. Make sure you add us on Instagram. Share that as well. Share our Instagram and TikTok. Let them know we have content on top of just doing podcast. And also, Courtney and I, remember, we're coming up with our first show for Haunts in the Cabin on Wednesday, August 16th at 7 p.m. Our show will be live every Wednesday. So if you are not signed up on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, we will be going live there all at the same time. So you can switch whichever one you want to go through and listen to. This season's going to be all about going through our each haunted houses, also hearing other people's paranormal or supernatural stories or experiences. And again, if you or you know someone that has an experience that they'd like to share, whether you want us to read it or they want to come on the show, definitely email us at hauntsinthecabin@gmail.com. And Courtney, do you want to add anything to that as well?
I was just going to say, I thought about this earlier. That's a week from tomorrow, and I'm very excited because we've been talking about this and kind of planning this for months. And the fact that it's almost here, Farah, I think that I can speak for both of us when I say that we are incredibly excited to go on this journey and kind of start this project. And I just hope that everyone else is as excited as we are. But that's kind of all I had to say. But also send us your stories because we want to hear them.
Yes, exactly. And same here, Courtney. We've been tossing this around for months and we're so excited to I don't think anybody's going to do something like that we're going to do on YouTube. So definitely, stay the ride with us for a couple episodes. Let us get the groove of everything and give us a chance. I think you're going to love it. I think that Courtney and I have a lot to offer, and especially with all our friends and family and listeners backing us up and supporting us, there's nothing that we can't do. But and then next Tuesday is episode 3, which is my episode, and I will be covering insectoid aliens. So make sure that you keep an eye out for your private link. And then, other than that, Stacy, David, Andy, Larry, I don't know if Jimmy made it, Beyond the Shadows, Z Baby, and Drewski, and all of our listeners out there that came on this little journey with us. Thank you so very much for hanging with us. The Paranormal Project presents Tuesday Top Terror. And until next time, cabin crew and other listeners, explore your strange.